Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. As you know, I am a big fan of the Panasonic cameras, especially for video. As a matter of fact, I like them as a hybrid for pretty much everything. I'm shooting right now with the Panasonic G85. That's what you're seeing me via right now in 4K. Beautiful little camera. Prior to that, I used the G7 and I really liked the G7. I owned that for about a year before I went to the G85. Got a viewer writing in with an interesting alternate perspective to the G7. We've got, please give us a name is the username here, which is kind of a funny little spin on a YouTube username. Very creative. I'm about to buy the Canon 200D, and the reason I chose it over the G7. Now, I should clarify for those of you that aren't aware, the 200D is the SL2. So that's a fairly recent Canon SL2. And the reason I chose it over the G7 was the color science. The greens and browns are so realistic and the sunsets look amazing. I watched some raw footage for the 200D down at Uluru, Australia. Hope I'm saying that right. And the reddy orange sand look beautiful. I believe the lens selection is amazing and the autofocus is unbeatable. And 4K doesn't have enough advantages for me to invest more money. P.S. The G7 costs more in Australia as it only came out in February. So I think that Canon is still the best camera company because they are for everything, both photo and video. I've used a Nikon for video once, and it was I think he says ancient here. It looks like it's misspelled, Model 2, and it was awful. I ended up reshooting it with my regular camera because it was just so ugly. Hopefully my opinion is helpful. So this was a comment on one of the videos where we were helping a viewer decide on what to buy. And it's interesting because there's always horses for courses and the camera that best suits your needs. As you know, as I've said, I'm a big fan of the Panasonic G7 and the G85, the GH5, all the Panasonic lineup is great for video, and I enjoy using it for photography too. However, in this situation, the SL2 is still a very capable camera. Our viewer here really likes the color science. He says specifically the greens and browns and sunsets being so realistic, which is a very personal thing, but also a very important thing. You know, the color coming out of your camera. Yeah, you can tweak it in post, but what you get right out of camera, to a lot of people, they want to shoot and not do a lot of processing. So it can be a very important thing. Lens selection, he mentions too. Lens selection is amazing. And certainly Canon has some beautiful pieces of glass. And I think you can do a really nice kit. As you'll know, my favorite kit selection, if you're getting into an APS-C Canon like the SL2, I really like the 10 to 18, which nobody really has anything quite like that. Quite as wide a lens for that inexpensive a price. They're around $200. I'll put a link below. You can check it out. 18 to 135 STM, which is often a kit lens, is a great performing little lens, great walk around lens, great range, and a really good value. And then you pair that with a 55 to 250 STM, quite a decent lens for the money. Are there better lenses? Sure. But for the money, for the value you're getting there, most hobbyists are going to be quite satisfied with that lens until you know you want to step it up and get into much more expensive glass. But for the value, it's very hard to beat. And then, again, for the value that's very hard to beat, my fourth selection is the 50 f1.8 STM. So, yeah, lens selection is fantastic. And then his point that 4K video doesn't have enough advantages. That's a personal thing. I think it has a lot of advantages people overlook, such as the ability to extract larger stills, to crop heavily if you're just even going to export at 1080. So if you're working on a 1080 timeline, but you have 4K footage, you can zoom in and crop and whatnot, and you don't lose quality. There's a lot of advantages that I think people overlook, but it still becomes a personal thing. If you don't need it, if you don't want it, then something like an SL2 is still a very good option at a very good price. We're looking at $549.99 here. The big advantage to it is it has the dual pixel AF system. You could see at this point it doesn't have a lot of reviews. It's got 4.5 out of 5 stars though for 12 customer reviews. It's got the newer 24 megapixel CMOS, so very similar, if not the same, to what's in the 80D or the 77D. Very good, very nice sweet spot for megapixels. Again, it says, the fast, accurate dual pixel AF with phase detection. It's got the very angle touchscreen LCD. It's got the built-in Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth. It's got full HD 60 and an external microphone input. I mean, there's a lot here for a beginner photographer. There's a lot here for your average vlogger, for your average photographer. I mean, cameras have come so far now that this is still a very good option at a very good price point. Personally, the lack of 4K is an issue for me, but you could still do a lot, even in video, with 1080 and not worry about it. So great feedback here from our viewer, and I just wanted to throw that out there because, I do heavily recommend the G7, but, here's a situation where the SL2 was much more suited to him, and especially, too, the price difference. The G7 was more in Australia. In the North America, in the United States, and in Canada, you get the G7 for very economical price, especially in the United States. It's as low on sales and clearances and blowouts and Black Fridays and things. I've seen it for $400. Whether you can find that right at this moment, maybe not, but I have seen it go on some crazy deals, especially last season, Black Friday and Christmas and whatnot. To pick up a G7 for that price is a phenomenal 4K camera. But if you can't get it at that price, the SL2, there's another option. What do you guys think? Would you entertain the SL2 as your video camera, your do-everything camera? Would you do it for the reasons that our viewers saying, for the color science, for the lens selection? Or is the G7 still more your cup of tea? Have you bought the SL2 over an option like the G7? Are you currently using it? Are you using it for vlogging? Are you impressed with it? It doesn't have the highest end autofocus system from Canon, but it still seems to be very, very competent. And a lot of people really liking this little camera. Curious to see what you guys have to say, especially if you have it or if you shot with it. Let us know in the comments below. If you shot it against the G7, by all means, let's hear what you have to say. Looking forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks for your question or your comment here to our viewer. And stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com.